So anyone picking up my book and dipping in should expect some insights into Beethoven's 10 sonatas for violin and piano, wonderful works all, but from the point of view of a pianist. Beethoven, of course, was a pianist, and I feel a real connection to his music through the keyboard. Most of the violin sonatas are works that he would have premiered and he would have played a lot, written for himself to play. Before his encroaching deafness forced him to leave the concert platform. So there's something very hands-on about the way that I approach things. I'm a pianist and a teacher who's been thinking about these wonderful pieces for 20, 30 years. And there are academic concepts in there and a bit of basic musical analysis, but really, I'm concerned with how does Beethoven tell us the stories that he does? How does he make us feel the way that we do? How do his stories reveal themselves over time? It's very much from the point of view of a performer or a listener. And I hope that, by taking that attitude, we'll understand a little bit more about really the sort of human element of Beethoven's music. What's always particularly drawn me to the music of Beethoven is his universality, really. He just, every time he writes a new piece, he seems to set himself a new challenge. And amongst the hundreds of works that he wrote, there are the most intimate, confessional pieces, there are the most logical, thought-out pieces, they're the most universal pieces, there are huge pieces, there are small pieces. He really tried and achieved, as far as I'm concerned, pretty much everything, which was why he became such a huge figure for all the composers who tried to follow him. And indeed, within the 10 sonatas that I'm writing about in this book, you'll find everything from the monumental Kreutzer Sonata, which weighs in at 3/4 of an hour and is written for two huge virtuosi, of Beethoven himself and a visiting violinist, to play in public, to the sort of confessional late sonata that he wrote, opus 96, with a far more intimate tone, or the humour of some of the early works when Beethoven just seems to be joking either at his listeners' expense or even his colleagues' expense. So these kinds of things I find absolutely fascinating, that in such a sort of relatively small body of works, only 10 sonatas, Beethoven can reveal so many different facets of his personality and of his art. Having lived with these works and performed them for so long, it feels almost unfair to pick a favourite, but nevertheless, certain of the 10 sonatas do speak to me particularly intimately. I think there are two favourites that I'd single out. I have a particular affection for the A major sonata from the opus 30 set. Beethoven wrote it whilst grappling with the onset of his deafness. And I'm far from saying it's an autobiographical piece, but it seems to be so probing and searching and tender, and it just has a wonderful depth to it for a work written by such a relatively young man, I suppose. He was only just over 30 at the time. But the other one that I love to bits is the final sonata, opus 96, which dates from getting on for a decade later than that. And it's a truly wonderful, intimate, sort of confessional piece. It's wonderful to play. It feels like a work that you sort of find your way through. And I think I can reveal something about why that might be in the book. There are all kinds of little messages and little musical ciphers in that work, which seem to be meant for particular people and seem to give it a very personal and romantic kind of quality, the kind of thing that Schumann would have done as second nature. Whilst writing the book, I was also performing the pieces a lot. I mean, it was kind of inevitable for me to try and ingest them, as it were, into my system. But I mean, I certainly learnt an awful lot through that process. Particularly, I think maybe about the opus 30 set, the middle sonatas. The wonderful C minor, for instance, that I'd always loved and always sort of been slightly in awe of. Delving into pieces he was writing at the time, and his sort of on-off relationship, you might say, with republicanism and revolutionary themes and all that kind of thing. Absolutely fascinating. And also I think I discovered an awful lot about the early E-flat sonata, which I suddenly realised by playing it has so much in common with another piano concerto that he wrote at a similar time in C minor, and shared figurations. And then I delved a bit deeper and I found a shared sort of structure. And the deeper I delved, the more I became convinced that this early sonata was a kind of little prototype concerto for two instruments. It sure feels like that when you play it anyway. Ask any pianist and it's possibly the most fiendish of the 10 to play. So yeah, all manner of insights and all manner of things that I've learned, but obviously always still learning too. I hope that anyone reading this book will take away, first of all, a love for the pieces that I'm writing about. I mean, that's obvious, but it's got to be there at the top of the list. Beethoven himself doesn't need advocacy, but these 10 violin sonatas are by no means the most often played of his pieces, and within them there are certainly a few which are quite neglected, so that's one thing. But also that there's a place for musicology, if we want to use that word, that reveals something about the spirit and the potential meaning of the music, and that as a pianist myself, it's important to me to just gradually bring together, one might say, the music conservatoire and the university, or the performers and the academics, or whichever way you want to look at it, who became a little bit divided in the past, it has to be said. But surely this knowledge that we all have about music can serve similar purposes, and could be turned in various directions. And I would really like it if people read this book and took away the idea that by immersing yourself and thinking about things and engaging with different theories and literary theories and musical theories, that one might actually get a deeper understanding about the spirit and the meaning and the workings of the music as it is when you perform it or listen to it, rather than just as it is when you see it written down in the score.